Hey, everybody. There's big news in cannabis. You can find me over at cannabisindustrylawyer.com. My name's Tom, and we're going to dig into the Cannabinoid Safety and Regulation Act. It's very interesting, introduced by Ron Wyden. We're going to talk about three things. First, what it says, then what it means, and finally, how likely is it to get passed. So if this is your first time joining us, thank you so much. If you're a member, awesome. Your name will be in the credits on the podcast on Sundays. Let's get into the bill. Here we are inside the bill. As you can see, it's very new, and so a lot of this stuff hasn't been filled in yet. Bill to amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. This is what has interplay between the Controlled Substances Act. This bill proposed for the purpose of regulating cannabis and cannabinoid products. And so to have this called the Cannabis Safety and Regulation Act. Let's go over the table of contents quickly and then into each aspect of it. We can see what it actually says and analyze what that means. First, they're going to be amending the FDCA. It's because there's a huge gaping hole in it, including for the regulation of cannabinoid beverages containing THC. Those are currently illegal because the FDA says they're adulterated food. This bill aims to correct that. We are trying to legalize natural weed first. Don't give us no Diet Coke chemical weed. Natural weed legalized nationwide first. Then they go to the public health awards to prevent underage cannabis use, and then impaired driving and prevention, trying to set a standard for what it means in impaired driving and get some funding for this. But the most important thing is watch how they define cannabis. It is, in my opinion, just despicable because they are leaving marijuana in the lurch. And this is going to the first thing it does is it calls for the FDA to start regulating cannabinoid products, and it defines what an adulterated cannabinoid product is. These cannabinoid products are now going to need to be manufactured in a GMP compliant facility, which, what does that mean? Most small businesses that are making cannabinoid products will be bankrupted because they don't have that. And then all of these regulations that come on top of it. That's if you make any claims about your cannabinoid product. And then they have, these are a label. A lot of this is like in the FDCA already for regular products. It's just that cannabis has never been a regular product. And now they're going to have cannabis, but they're going to define it in such a way later on that I find pretty annoying. And of course, making sure that people only older than 21 are able to purchase it, and the risks that are included in taking cannabinoid, including a risk of drug test failure. I mean, it's just, you're not legalizing natural weed, you're legalizing synthetic weed that gets you high and still fails your drug test. This is terrible policy. It's intended for animals. Don't forget to give CBD or THC to your pets. And then there's registration. We talk about Section 1104. You're going to have to register your establishment pursuant to this law. There it is, registration, existing facilities. They have 90 days after the date of such enactment, and according to the section, to create a method to register each facility, new facilities. And then they provide times and the renewals and the contents of the registration. Each facility covers out a covered activity, and define what covered activities are. They must provide all the brands that they're going to manufacture. So if you have a new thing, you need to tell the feds. They'll have a website where you can register, notification of receipts, uniform product identification system. This sounds kind of like a seed to sale or a product tracking system. So that regulation, now you're going to have to comply with this uniform system and identification of cannabinoid products, a list of such products in accordance with the system to include the identification number, a SKU number, for example. And the secretary is going to keep an up-to-date list of all of these facilities that are there. And then they have a fee, $500. $500 fee is a little misleading in the sense that you think that it's not very expensive, but that's just for the registration, the compliance. That's why it costs so much to operate in the heavily regulated legal cannabis industry is compliance. And a lot of those compliance costs are going to start being put on the operators pursuant to the CRSA. A list of all cannabinoid products which are being manufactured. All other information that the Secretary requires. Form a matter of list. You can get suspended if you are not making these products correctly. You can be suspended and your license can be revoked. There's a hearing procedure for it, which is a due process. Post-corrective actions, vacating orders. So the regulator, the FDA, is now in charge of whether or not you are a licensed cannabinoid product manufacturer. Welcome to the regulation. If this passes, I hope that it doesn't pass unless they also add weed to it. So covered activity, that's what they will be regulating. They will be regulating the covered activity, preparing, propagating, compounding, processing, packaging, importing, labeling, or holding of a cannabinoid product for commercial distribution in the U.S. or for foreign export. General provisions for control of cannabinoid products, remote sales, which again, I don't like that they're going to create an interstate market in getting you high that you can purchase online. This is stupid. And it is not something that alcohol allows you to do. It's not something that cigarettes allows you to do without some minor exceptions for cigars or wine. And so that's one of the things that is going to be very, very bad for the states that have legalized natural weed as opposed to the science that would be shipped to your door through that. Preventing use of minors, you would have to, if you are going to sell it online, have a system that you verify the person purchasing it is 21 years old. Labeling standards, standardization information panel for adjustable cannabinoid products. Universal symbols will need to be done. And then in the states, they can offer their own universal symbols. And so this is one of the first examples of really bad policy, being that you have a federal law and then states can be exempted or do their own thing. How do you have an interstate market if the states can completely foil that interstate market? I don't know. Tamper evident in child safety packaging. In general, child safety, which is fine because a lot of these products currently, not only are they illegal because the FDA has never approved any of them, they also do not have any standards for packaging. And here's the thing that will knock out all the small businesses: good manufacturing practices required no later than 9 months after the date that this becomes in effect. Promulgate regulations and that will create the methods and rules for preparing this. This would be like any other consumer packaged goods you wanted to put into the interstate commerce system. It's quite expensive to create these types of commercial kitchens in compliance with GMP and your federal licensing rules that you're going to have. It will crowd out all the small businesses that are claiming that hemp is good for it. Standardizations of ISO 17025. And then that's interesting. Have the term and then they define it. Usually you define the term and they use it, but whatever. Requirements for entities conducting testing. Be registered and in good standing with the DEA as a hemp analytical testing laboratory. Requirements for testing. So there we go. They aren't going to be using the dry weight basis anymore, it seems. And then official weights and measures, test for pesticides, synthetic inputs used to produce semi-synthetic. So everything that's being used to create all these IHDs needs to be screened from that. Potency analysis and the measurements of the THC in the finished product, the total cannabinoid content of the finished product, the concentration of THC, the concentration of cannabinoids, subject to quality assurance protocols, analytical methods, ensure the tests are sensitive, product safety thresholds. Now they've regulated you out of existence, and now they can start banning you out of existence. The hemp people, like, again, if you want natural weed to be added to this, then sure, we can get behind it. But right now, we haven't gotten to the definitions yet. You'll see why I'm not really thrilled about this particular bill, because it does allow for the banning of many of these cannabinoids that are food products, and that contains cannabinoid product shall not be deemed adulterated simply because it is made or derived from cannabis, or it has constituents from cannabis. Dietary supplements containing cannabinoids. A dietary supplement is now going to be able to contain cannabinoids, which is interesting. They will not be deemed adulterated simply because they have cannabinoids. And we get into the processing and manufacturing of cannabinoid and semi-synthetic cannabinoids. If promulgated, the regulations under this paragraph shall determine the safety of artificially or synthetically and semi-synthetically derived cannabinoids across various methods of administration. The regulations that they are allowed to write, if this becomes law, can say all of those products you're selling are unsafe. And they establish a process for the removal of the market of dangerous artificial or semi-synthetic cannabinoids. And they can have rules and regulations to determine the safety of these. Currently, the FDA is saying they're unsafe. There's no science. So what did they do with the Controlled Substances Act back in 1970? That's why marijuana was in it. That's why the Schaefer report was there. They put it in Schedule 1 and then they studied it. So I can see the FDA doing the exact same thing, banning every IHD, semi-synthetic, and then studying it. And then hopefully allowing natural marijuana to be Schedule 3 and more legal than Diet Coke marijuana. I can't believe our country's so freaking stupid. They can't just legalize weed. They got to create like fake weed in a lab and call it hemp. Standards of products. This is interesting. Now the cannabinoid products, again, the Farm Bill is for the agricultural commodity. This is for the stuff you put into your body. Requiring the testing of cannabinoid product done by a licensed person, requiring that the results of the testing show the cannabinoid products in conformity with applicable standards. So they are going to really dig into how much cannabis is in the stuff that you're selling and how many cannabinoids are in the stuff that you're selling. And we get to Section 1107, recall authority. Now, just like we do in the legal marijuana industry, you need to have recall protocols and procedures in order to remain compliant. When I read this act, it's a lot like they're going to try to regulate hemp, call it cannabis, exclude marijuana, and welcome the hemp industry into the highly regulated cannabis industry. And then they might just yank all their products and hopefully make natural weed the more prevalent choice. Because what have we studied more? Delta-8 THC or regular weed? It's been regular weed for decades. Delta-8 THC was in trace amounts until they couldn't sell the CBD oil anymore and they started synthesizing it. They can order recalls, records and reports of cannabinoid products. We have to keep ours for a particular period of time on site, digitally backed up. They don't have any time provisions in here of how long the record needs to be kept. It just, they have to keep records is kind of what it says. And then corrective actions, prohibition on flavored vapes. So all those vapes that are out there that have flavorings in it besides the cannabinoid flavorings may be banned. And of course, they have the application of terpenes. They're allowing terpenes, 5% of the total weight, cannot be greater than 6% of the total weight, and they must be naturally occurring terpenes. And they define cannabis vape. Electric cannabinoid product delivery system means an electronic device that delivers a cannabinoid product via aerosolized or vaporized solution to the user, inhaling from the device and any component, even the cart, the liquid or the part of the accessory of the device, whether or not sold separately, that would all be comprised. And this is the exact definition that they have for the nicotine vapes as well. And then, of course, this is the exception. It's called the effect, preservation of federal, state, tribal, and local authority. So the thing that Missouri just did, the thing that California just did, banning hemp, will still be legal. You're creating a law, and you're like, but any state or local or Indian tribe could completely exempt themselves from it. Crazy. How do you have federal law and have any exception you want under the sun? Good luck with that interstate commerce right there. However, like they say, you're not allowed to get in the way of the transport. So let's say you make the hemp derivatives in Oregon and you ship them to Nevada and you have to drive through California for some reason. You'd stop and they're like, well, you're not allowed to sell these here. And you say, I'm not selling them here, going to Nevada. And they wouldn't be able to stop the shipment. Okay. And then the authority of the USDA, they still give the authority of the USDA to be able to set the rules for growing hemp as defined under the Agricultural Marketing Act. And now we get into Section 102, amendments to the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetic Act. These are really difficult to read because, well, let me show you. The term in paragraph RR4 by inserting cannabinoid product and after medical device. Right now, you would have to pull up that other law, the FTCA, and go to paragraph RR4 and be like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. Now, this is where it's interesting. We have some definitionals that they have. And this is the definitional that grinds my gears the most. The term cannabis means, and so this is going to be the first time under federal law, we're actually going to have a definition of cannabis as a term of art. All parts of the cannabis plant, whether growing or not, the seeds of such plant, the resin extracted from such plant, and every compound mixture. The term cannabis does not include any cannabis plant actively under cultivation that is being cultivated in accordance with the requirements of the Farm Bill. That's what our subtitle G of the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946 is. Cannabinoid product, and then of course the mature stalks and you've taken all the cannabinoids out of the plant. That's also not cannabis. And then the term cannabinoid, so they define cannabinoid as well. What did they mean? Okay, so cannabis means the definition is so encompassing that I think that marijuana is almost included in it. Because it's all parts of the plant cannabis, whether growing or not. Well, marijuana is cannabis. And the seeds of such plant, resins extracted, natural vapes, every compound mixture, edibles and all that other stuff of the plant. The term cannabis does not include, however, the cannabis plant actively under cultivation under the Farm Bill, cannabinoid product, or the mature stalks of the cannabis plant. So the cannabinoid product now is an accepted term for cannabis, but marijuana is not there anywhere. So provided that cannabis is not being grown as hemp, it still counts as cannabis, right? All parts of the plant, whether growing or not, except for hemp. The cannabinoid product is then defined differently. The term cannabinoid means, and they're going to define all the cannabinoids, all that they're aware of, at least, of the ones that they aren't aware of. And then they talk about whether or not it has any effects. They've realized that whole 0.3 delta 9 THC was a little too small. And so they really expanded their scope of cannabinoids. And of course, then the term cannabinoid product, now they've defined that. The term cannabinoid product means an article or product, including its components or parts, that contains or purports to contain any quantity of one or more cannabinoids that are derived from hemp as defined in section 297A. So from my understanding, cannabinoid products are now from hemp, but cannabis isn't. So like those gummies that you have, that is just cannabis, but then this is really only for the sale of cannabinoid products. Only for the sale of cannabinoid products defined from hemp. Then you have to see that from the cannabinoid product aspect of it. They have some exceptions from the cannabinoid products, and they have what a serious adverse effect is. It means use of the product could result in death, life-threatening adverse experiences, congenital anomaly or birth defect, or other serious medical event. Then they define the term THC, and go pretty broad. Now THC is going to mean delta 6, delta 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, all these deltas, all isomers. And they also say, including a precursor THCA. All right. They go into the THCVs and delta 8 THCVs, the hydrogenated forms of them, including HHC, hexohydrocannabinol, analogs. So they've realized that they defined hemp too smallly with that delta 9 THC. And now they are saying, well, if you're going to make products out of it, and then they have this huge net of what it means to be THC now. And then they have artificially or synthetically derived. Those are completely off the table, the synthetically derived cannabinoids. But you have to remember, semi-synthetic cannabinoids are different. So they define semi-synthetic cannabinoids. That is a substance created by a single chemical reaction that converts one cannabinoid extracted from a cannabis plant directly into a different cannabinoid that is found in no more than trace amounts in the cannabis plant. Delta 8, trace amounts, HHC, and THCV. All these other ones, all the semi-synthetics, and they say that delta 8 is right there. However, semi-synthetic cannabinoid does not include a cannabinoid that is produced through decarboxylation alone, without the use of chemical reagents or catalysts. Of course, that catalyst, I guess, could be like heat in the terms of THCA, but THCA is now defined as THC. Of course, this is for the FDA, not for the USDA. Prohibitive acts. And so you have all these prohibitions that you're not allowed to do. And then the last part of this bill, besides the penalties, there's some heavy penalties for violating this act. The heavy penalty is $250,000 per violation, $10 million for all such violations. Pretty heavy penalties, millions and millions of dollars. Repeated violations. You repeatedly violate, granted, they have hearings, but now these hearings are administrative hearings through the regulations of the FDA. It's one of those things where the Looper case that just overturned Chevron may weaken the FDA's ability to bestow those penalties on you. Seizure authorities, they're able to take all your shit or if you go over the lines. This one's really interesting. Regulation of cannabinoid beverages containing tetrahydrocannabinol. So THC drinks are starting to be everywhere, and they want this to be modeled off of the regulatory frameworks for alcohol. I don't understand why if you make THC from hemp into a beer, it suddenly can be regulated like alcohol, but natural weed can't. What the heck is that, America? Seriously, what the heck? And then they get into public health, and they talk about all these things and how they're going to fund it. And then they talk about how they're going to study it on the road to try to determine what it means to have a test for impairment for cannabis. Now let's do points 2 and 3 pretty quickly. What does this all mean? It means that the country would rather regulate fake weed than natural weed, which is cripplingly bad policy when you really think about it. You're going to have the same results, even in like beverages. So THC beer, diffuse those throughout our lands as if it was liquor sold at liquor stores, regulated by liquor, all the other chemical stuff, and then the natural weed. No, that's the problem. And this is a great bill if it regulates all cannabis the same way, because then you would have one set of rules for getting yourself high and not all the marijuana laws on the books for the criminal aspect of it. Creating an interstate commerce system for getting high from weed, it kind of seems like THCA and all those flower products, those, I didn't really see how those are in this bill. I might need to review it more closely. If you see how smokable hemp is covered in this bill, leave it in the comments for us. And then also, doesn't do anything to legalize it. It just ignores it. And all the states and all the cities and Indian tribes can keep it illegal if they want. They just can't stop the interstate commerce through their borders. This is not policy. This is crap. And so that's one of the reasons why I really don't like this bill, which brings us to our third point. Do we think this is going to go anywhere? No. And some people will blame the Democrats in the Senate because they have 50 votes. But that's not true, because you need 60 votes to have a bill get called. And Mitch McConnell has 50 votes. And so you would need 10 Republicans and 100% of the Democrats to have this thing become law. And it's so bad in how it fails to regulate everything that I don't think it's going to pass, which of course means there's a pretty large glaring hole regarding any federal law for smokable hemp flower and also vaporized hemp. I still don't understand how THCA can be a vapor. I just don't. Somebody who has a chemistry degree, please put that in the comments. I just don't get it. I think that's just straight up marijuana. Nobody's enforcing the law. Nobody seems to care. All of those beverages and all of those edibles, the FDA has sent warning labels on that. That's all adulterated food, which is by the definition, that's why they're trying to amend the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And so that's our deep dive into the Cannabinoid Safety and Regulation Act. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe our videos. Tune into the podcast on Sundays. We want to see natural weed get legalized in the United States.